Action. Welcome back to Show and Tell. Happy holidays, everyone. Happy New Year in just a couple of days. This, of course, will be my last podcast for 2024. This year, I'm not going to do a recap of everything that I knit. I never have a lot of throughput, but I do want to share with you my last finished object of the year. And yes, I was able to squeeze in 2024. I'm glad I listened to those of you who commented that I should put 2024 because I was on the fence about whether to put 2025 in anticipation of finishing it in early January. But I'm glad I went with 2024 because clearly I finished. I did not subject myself to Mitten Island. Um, I finished the first mitten, the one with my initials on it. I guess it must be about a month ago. I don't know. And for some reason, I got busy with other things, you know how that is. And I wasn't in a big hurry to knit the second mitten, but I just wanted to have a finished object since I have so few. And I wanted to be able to show you that my whole ensemble is complete. So here are the mittens from this book. It's actually not the mitten pictured on the cover, but I'll show you the mitten inside. And then I'll show you the other pieces that I finished that are not in this book. So here's the mitten. It's called Monogram. There's a mitten and a sock from this book, Traditional Nordic Knits by Johanna Wallen. If you're new to this channel and you have not seen my work before, you should know that I mostly knit from vintage patterns. I'll make an exception for something that's traditional. These probably date back a while since it's been a long-standing Norwegian tradition. I think often they were knit as wedding gifts with the initials of the people, or maybe from the bride to the groom with their initials on them, something like that. Anyway, if you have not been here before, then you will not have seen this sweater, which I drafted myself based on a vintage sweater that I had seen a photograph of. There is no pattern in existence, so I had to roll my own. But the picture I saw had stripes on the sleeves and a striped turtleneck and buttons going down. So I replicated that, and I think I came pretty close to replicating, if not exactly replicating, the motif. And then I decided to look for a hat that was like the hat in the picture. So again, I took like a generic hat pattern and imposed this motif on it because the photograph that I had seen had that. The yarn that I used is 100% cashmere. So I knew I was going to have enough to make the pom-pom. I doubt if you'll see anywhere else a cashmere pom-pom, but it is really, really gorgeous. I talked about this in a prior episode, so I won't go much further than that. The yarn for the mittens and the sweater and the hat is from Color Mart, 100% cashmere, 3 over 28 NM, I believe, is their weight. It's super fine. I held it double to do all of these. And I think it's 32 stitches to 4 inches. That was my gauge everywhere on a size, I think it's a size 1 needle. If that's not correct, I'll put it on the screen. I did use, I think, a different needle size for the hat. But anyway, I mean, all that information is on my Ravelry page. You could find me at billietoy on Ravelry. Well, since I haven't talked at length about the mittens, let me show you a little bit. It started with just a plain stockinette to make a hem that you turn in and then stitch. And then there are a couple of different motifs before you get into, sorry, yarn knitting from the bottom up. Although if you knit the socks, you do have to do this upside down because you want the cuff of your sock to be up here and you want the numbers to be right side up. But anyway, getting back to the mitten. Um, you, you stop the motif to create this lozenge, almost like a cartouche, for the year. And they do give you a chart of different numbers, and then you have to assemble whatever numbers you want. And when you get to about here, you start for the thumb gusset, which is knit in a checkerboard pattern, different than the motif. So you're knitting and then you get to the thumb gusset and you do these stitches and then you continue with the original motif. But the thumb gusset ends here. So from this point on, these stitches are on a holder, and then you continue up to where you start doing the decreases. After you're done binding off, just by threading your yarn on a needle and pulling it through, just like you would with fingertips of a glove, or I guess some hats maybe that come to a point at the top. When you're done binding that off, then you come back and pick up these stitches and again knit in the pattern to complete the thumb. They take a while to knit because it's such a fine gauge, but how could I have the sweater and the hat without having the matching mittens? So a while back, I had presented this question, which some of you answered, about how much yarn I would have left when I finished the sweater. And, we always play yarn chicken. With this, the saga went, I ordered initially a cone of white, a cone of blue. And when the yarn came in this thin, I used the smallest needle that I own, a size 1, and I didn't like the fabric it was making. Remember, I was creating my own pattern, so I could do whatever gauge I opted for, but I just didn't like the fabric. So when I doubled it, when I held it double, I liked the fabric much better. But then I thought, what if I don't have enough yarn to do that? I don't think I have twice the amount of yarn. Again, without a pattern, I really couldn't be specific about how much yarn this project was going to take. But because the color was so special, and if you know Color Mart, they don't have a specific color palette for the season. They're getting whatever mill ends they get, and the colors can change from moment to moment. So I thought, oh, I just can't risk being partway through the sweater and running out of the blue. So I went ahead and I ordered an additional cone of blue and an additional cone of white. But in that instance, I had them pre-wind it for me already doubled. So I would like to know if I would have had enough. And now that I'm all done with the hat and the mittens, it's not a really accurate picture, but I thought it would be interesting to weigh the total that I have remaining and just see if maybe I could have done all of this with one set of cones. It looks like I'm much thinner on the blue than I am on the white. Here you can even see the cone starting to peek through. But let me weigh each of these. I set up my scale. The first cone, including the weight of the cone itself, is 41.63 grams. The white is 81.61 grams. This is the single blue, 50.38 grams. And the single white, 110.57 grams. I'm going to put the numbers on the screen for you. I'm going to back out the weight of an empty cone, which I did for you in a prior episode. I think it was like 31 grams, something like that. Uh, which would make sense if this one, which is almost empty, was like 40 something. So I'll try and tabulate all of that, add the blues together, add the whites together and see. But it seems like these two blues, this is not a whole cone's worth. So I definitely use more than one cone of blue. Isn't it interesting? Everything I did was mixture of blue and white. All right, the hat definitely has a lot more blue, especially this pom-pom, which was a yarn hog. That may account for why I have so little blue left. Anyway, I'm glad that I completed this whole set, and I've already worn this sweater a couple of times, and it feels so good being cashmere, and it's extra warm because of the stranding. So, it's really, I'm glad I did it, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So there you have my FO for this episode. Works in progress. There are two that I'm currently working on, and I forgot to bring one of them, so hang on a second. I'm working on this sweater that is going to have an Art Deco motif because I know I've told you in October 2025, instead of going to Rhinebeck, I'm going to be going to Paris for the World Congress on Art Deco. I have to have the sweaters to wear, so I started this one well ahead of time. I did a provisional cast on here and knit up. And after I saw how it was coming along, I decided, well, let me see how the ribbing looks. So I started knitting downwards using different size needles to do the ribbing. And then I put the whole thing on tubes that you can slide your stitches onto. With ChiaoGoos, it's really kind of easy. You stick your needle tip into the tubing and you just slide your stitches across. Sometimes it's a little finicky, but often it's a very smooth transition. I stopped because I wanted to start on the other side. This will probably be the back. I'm not crazy about how the color is pooling, so I wanted to see if it would be different on the other piece, and then I'll decide which one I want to be the front or the back. The yarn I'm using is Knit Picks Shimmer, 70% baby alpaca, 30% silk, 440 yards to 50 grams lace weight. Same thing as that yarn, too thin to make a nice fabric. So I'm holding this double. And what I did was I undid the skein, spread it out in the, big long oval, and wound off two balls. I need to weigh these to make sure it's 50-50. There's some YouTube videos that I use to help me learn how to make a ball that would not be round, that would be more like a cake, like this, which is done on a ball winder and a Swift. I don't have a ball winder and a Swift. I live in too small an apartment to have accessories like that I very rarely need. At Vogue Knitting Live next month, they do have Swifts and ball winders on hand for people to use. So I may bring some of my yarn with me to wind. Yeah. I mean, it's nice having those cakes. They stack up nicely. I love seeing them in other people's podcasts. But anyway, I have these, and I'm approaching the cake look. This one's a little more rounded, but it's an art, and like anything else, the more you do it, the better you get. I'll put a picture here of what the finished sweater will look like. I will need a second color. And as I mentioned, I'll be going to VKL at the Marriott Marquis. I think it's January 19th, 20th, 21st. Please comment below if you're going to be there. Maybe we can arrange to meet up. Last year, I took a group of people to the Garment Center, to a trim shop that has all kinds of beautiful ribbons and some buttons. This year, I was thinking if people want to, like if you let me know, I might be willing to organize an outing to the Metropolitan Museum of Art. It is a major tourist destination in New York City, and one that I'm very passionate about. In prior episodes, I've shown little snippets of shows that I've been to. So yeah, let me know if that's something that you'd be interested in doing with me. I'd be happy to show you around my favorite works of art, my favorite. It's hard to even call them works of art because some of them are like so unique, facades of buildings or entire buildings that are installed into the museum space. But I do have favorites, and I've done this little tour for people who have come to visit me from other parts of the world. So I'm happy to do it for you. Okay, I'm digressing. Um, my other work in progress is the sweater for the upcoming knit along, which is pictured right here. Normally, I would begin the knit along at the same time as the people who are participating, but for some reason, I felt like with this one, I wanted to get a head start just so that I don't fall behind. Um, and also to work out any pitfalls that I may come across. For example, already I see that this fabric is curling up. So the bottom of the fabric, instead of being ribbing, has some garter stitch. And I went to Ravelry to see, like, are people talking in any of the forums about garter stitch flipping? And sure enough, somebody said, oh, Roxanne Richardson has a wonderful video. Who would have thunk? So I immediately went and watched that video, and she did offer a solution to that, which if you join the knit along, I'm going to share with you. So please do join us. Um, so I've only done this much, which actually is a good amount. I'm not used to knitting on size 6 needles, so this is going pretty swiftly for me. I think this took me like a couple of days. I haven't purchased all of the yarn yet because I was waiting to see, first of all, if I even liked it. Second of all, because I knew I could always buy more black and white, and even with the different dye line, they would probably be close enough, especially because I'm marling them, that it wouldn't be obvious. I just didn't want to buy like a whole bunch of yarn so far in advance. I did buy a third color, even though the pattern is really just um, the marl and the solid white. I'm going for a real sock monkey look. So I also bought red yarn. Now, this particular pattern calls for knitted buttons, which I thought is very unusual. They're almost like little barrels. And since there are quite a few of them, I thought, well, this is going to be really boring. Let me start to knit them now. And maybe I'll knit them as I go along with the project so that I'm not burdened at the end with having to knit a couple dozen of these or whatever it is. Because there are going to be buttons on the sleeve, and there's buttons down the front, left and right. There's a whole bunch of buttons. So here's my first little one. You know, I'm crazy about vintage buttons, and I did for a brief moment think of, well, maybe just buying like real buttons. And then I thought, no, I want to do this exactly the way the pattern calls for. And I also thought it would give that sock monkey look to have little knitted thing. It's almost like lips. Anyway, that is what I am working on. I have no acquisitions. I tried to buy buttons. I went with two friends of mine into the garment center to a different place than the place I took people to, a place that my friend Jerry recommended. Beautiful shop. I should have taken a picture of it to show you, where long, narrow shop with floor to ceiling shelves with individual boxes for each button, very organized. And on the front of each box is like samples of what's inside the box. And the owner had things grouped by, like, kids' buttons, little animals, things that are flowers, things that are fruits. And then he had all metal buttons grouped together, a lot of black buttons grouped together. So very, very organized, which to me is an ideal situation instead of a mashup. But I couldn't find buttons for the cardigan that I'm not even going to show you the cardigan because I'm really not actually working on it now. I'll probably finish these two sweaters, which I just showed you before I go back to the cardigan. But look for in 2025 for me to finish up that cardigan. So I might have three sweaters that will be completed next year and maybe more. Again, I don't usually knit on size 6. I'm often on size 2s or 3s, so my stuff does take me longer. And oh, let's not forget that I still have for the Rink or the Lynx, which I would say I'm about 75% of the way through. I haven't done any more on it since I last showed it to you, so I'm not going to present it this episode, but I think that I could accomplish these four in 2025. And you know what? I'm going to publicly announce that will be my goal. I don't knit socks. I don't knit a lot of hats. Really, I'm a sweater knitter. And since some of these are already well underway, I think it's a very realistic goal for me. The cardigan, I'm working on the back with a motif that's not charted. I'm making it up myself. It's been a real headache, which is why I put it in a timeout. But even if I have to rip that out and just knit the back of the sweater solid black, both the sleeves are knit, the two fronts are knit. It's just a matter of getting the back right and then hoping that the sleeves fit in to the arm side correctly. So, everything with me always has a little tweaking, but I think I'm looking for 4 in 25. Now, I do have other things that I want to mention to you. First of all, you can tell by my clapboard at the beginning and some of my other episodes where I mention things happening in films or knitting in films and so forth. I love the cinema. I love the movies. So, of course, I dragged my husband to see Wicked with me day before Christmas, before he blew out of town to go visit his elderly father. I don't know what I was expecting. I hadn't seen the show on Broadway, although I imagine that the show was spectacular now that I've seen the film. But first of all, I want to ask who amongst you have seen the film and what did you think of it? And then I'll tell you what my thoughts were. I have to say, I was a little disappointed that it didn't use some of the elements from the 1939 original Wizard of Oz. I thought that maybe there would be some black and white things, and then suddenly, Emerald City and everything turns into color. Well, they didn't choose to do that. I did love the sets, beyond love. I thought the sets were really, really incredible. I don't see a lot of um, these blockbuster films like Lord of the Rings and all these other like sci-fi things that have unbelievable um, special effects and outrageous morphing of characters and, all sorts of bizarre trickery. So I'm not used to seeing those, and there was some element of that in this film, an appropriate amount. I enjoyed that a lot, but the sets to me were mind-blowingly gorgeous. The style's kind of like Art Nouveau, which I guess after Art Deco would be maybe my second favorite style. But there was also a little hint of arts and crafts movement. I love the library. If you haven't seen it, I don't want to spoil it too much for you, but I thought the sets were really A plus plus, extra credit, as well as the costumes. I expect that there will be Oscar nominations for costumes as well as sets, and maybe they would even win both categories. I haven't seen a lot of the other films this year. I don't know what's going to be nominated, but I thought it was really like stand out in those two categories. The costumes blew my mind because every single one was completely different from everything else. Glinda's pink wardrobe was so pretty and so um, creative. And then I thought all the other cast, all the, the chorus of people, all the dancers, every single person had a different costume, even though the theme that ran through it was the same. I just thought that was incredible. And I can't even imagine how they accomplished that because it's not like you could go and pull the stuff off the rack. Like, a lot of other films, the actors are wearing regular clothes that you could go to a department store and purchase. So these were all like just kind of handmade. In the credits, I even saw that there were two knitters credited. I tried to catch the names and I looked one of them up, but I can't really see that she has a lot of other knitting that's attributed to her. So anyway, I found the story a little bit hard to figure out. Like I knew there had to be a message in there somewhere, but it eluded me. So if you know what the messages were, I think there were more than one message. Kindness to animals, maybe. Not judging a book by its cover. I'm not really clear, and I haven't researched like what are the critics saying. I haven't read reviews or anything like that. But I'm asking you, like, if you saw it, what did you think the message was? Uh, while we're on the topic of films, I have a couple other things that I want to propose to you. Obviously, my love for knitting vintage and my love for Art Deco, my love for old movies makes me the kind of person who's very nostalgic. Ooh, I must have seen somewhere. Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. On Instagram, I follow a museum, and this museum posted a link to a film, like a short documentary film, that I'm going to put the link in my show notes for you to go and watch it. It's about the, I guess, pretty famous Minneapolis department store called Dayton's, which must be more than 100 years old. It's been through some iterations. Now it's owned by Macy's, but going back, I think 3 decades, they would take the eighth floor of their department store building and convert it into their annual Christmas show. They would spend like the entire year, as soon as the show ended, I guess January, they started planning for the next year right away. The figures are all like Disney kind of, um, what do they call it? Animatronics, like they're animated, they move. But there was always like a story and a pathway that you would follow through, kind of like a maze where there'd be like character development. So each year there would be a different theme. One year it was Mary Poppins, another year it was Dickens' Christmas Carol. But the documentary walks you through like interviews with some of the people who worked on creating these, like, diorama is not the right word, but these like scenes. They're the kind of scenes that you would find if you walked on Fifth Avenue in New York, all the big department stores like Saks Fifth Avenue, um, Bergdorf Goodman. Used to be Lord and Taylor, had a spectacular one. Lord and Taylor's flagship store is now closed, but always at Christmas time they would have like those velvet ropes where, people would have to like queue up, and then you would pass in front of each of the windows. And there was always some kind of a theme. People are so creative who design these things, and there'd be music on the street, playing. Kids just love coming. I mean, I didn't grow up in New York, but I know like New York kids would just clamor to have their parents bring them to see these windows. I used to take our son too, because they were spectacular. I mean, they were like, I can't even begin to imagine how much money they spent on decorating these windows. But in the case of the store in Minneapolis, because it was inside the store and a whole floor, it wasn't just like 6 windows or 8 windows. It's this whole big village that you would walk through. It got people to come into the store. So I think it was pretty clever, and I think it really worked for them. Unfortunately, the cost of doing it became prohibitive, and they kind of wound down. But in this documentary, they show you a lot of the different figures, the clothes they wore, the little stories that were written, and mainly some of the people who created them. It's really worth watching. I enjoyed it a lot. It's slightly under an hour, but it's a little bit of nostalgia that I don't know if you have in Europe or in other parts of the world. I think this is a very American, like a slice of Americana. Now, another film, it's like super, super short, is about a photography exhibit in the Shetland Islands in Lerwick by a photographer named Chris Morphet, who photographed a variety of people in their Fair Isle sweaters. So I think that's also, worth taking a watch. If you can't get to Shetland, take a look at this little film. I haven't talked much about the teaching that I'm doing, but in the last couple of weeks, I had a very interesting experience of being fingerprinted because I am working in a school with young children. And for some reason, they didn't ask for this before I began, but all of a sudden, something came up and they needed to have everybody fingerprinted. So in the olden days, when I worked in a bank and was bonded and fingerprinted, there was ink. You put your fingers in this ink pad and then they would roll it. It's no longer done that way. It's all like a digital thing where there's a scanner and you roll your fingers. Now, I remember the last time I was fingerprinted, um, maybe 8 or 10 years ago. I think it was still ink. The person doing it had a hard time getting my fingerprints because evidently the little pads of my fingers, those lines are kind of worn off. So they really worked very hard to get any kind of a fingerprint out. I guess with the digital, they get something. I don't know, but it was an interesting experience to have in New York. Everything is like not necessarily at street level. So I went into this like a small office building that's in the middle of a block right next to other small office buildings. And I went upstairs and there's a long corridor with other little offices. And I went in, it's like a top secret FBI kind of a like scary place. But I've been fingerprinted. I wanted to give a shout out to one of my viewers. A big thank you to Kathleen from North Carolina, who sent me an unexpected gift. Now, I do have a Ko-fi account. I do have in my show notes my PayPal and Venmo information, but I don't usually come on soliciting money from you. I've tried to keep this open and available and hope to build a good audience, but I was ecstatic. I was just thrilled. It's hardly ever happened. I think only one other person has sent me any money in the past unsolicited. So thank you, Kathleen. It was very, very kind of you and very generous. And I just wanted to express my appreciation. So thanks. This is the season when a lot of people are traveling. And one of the women who I've been teaching to knit is going on a ski trip with her family. Where are they going? Oh, yeah. They're going to Japan to go skiing. And she was wondering if she would be able to take her knitting needles on the flight. And I told her my personal experience that I, I've never had anything confiscated. I've had cuticle scissors confiscated from me in the early days of the TSA, but I've never had my needles confiscated. I have sometimes packed wooden ones in my suitcase just in case my ChiaoGoos were taken away, which, perish that thought. I have also shown that I've taken a piece of tin foil and wrapped them to make them look like something, not a knife, not anything dangerous. But, my feeling is this is no more dangerous than a ballpoint pen that you might have in your pocket, and it is about the same length. And it looks curved. It's not curved. It's my camera distorting this. Anyway, she like whipped out her phone and typed in, TSA regulations, and she put in knitting needles and found that knitting needles are allowed. So I'm going to put a link in the show notes. You can take a look at this. You can take a screenshot of this in case you're ever questioned at the airport. But on the TSA's website, tsa.gov/travel, blah, 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 it specifically says knitting needles. So I thought that, that's a good public service announcement that you would all be interested to know. I know some other podcasters talk about their health. I try and avoid it because who wants to hear about your problems? But recently, I've been having a problem with my Achilles tendon. It's the downside of being a walker. One of the joys of living in a big city, a thriving, vibrant city, is that things are dynamic. Things are always changing. I find when I go out of town for a couple of weeks, I come back and the building that used to be there is demolished, no longer there, or the building that they were constructing now has 3 more floors added, or a new restaurant is opened. There's always something changing, which makes it so fascinating to walk around my city. And I do love very much to walk. When you live in a city like New York or Paris, or imagine London, or any vibrant city, I think especially New York. Well, I shouldn't say that. I mean, let me just say, I think New York is a fantastic place to walk around. And I try and walk wherever I'm going as often as I can because I don't really get a lot of exercise otherwise. I don't belong to a gym anymore since the pandemic closed my gym down. And I don't enjoy working out online. Like, if I'm going to work out, I want to be in a class with other people, with somebody really, pushing me. So suffice it to say, I try and walk when I can. Well, evidently, I walked too much because the physical therapist, who's now seen the x-ray of my foot and heel, said, the best thing you could do is stop walking right now, just relax that. And he taught me about RICE. I don't know if you know this acronym. R is for rest, I is for ice, C is for compression, E is for elevate. So I've been trying to keep my foot elevated when I knit. Twice a day, I put ice packs around my heel. I bought the compression socks. And rest, I've hardly walked in the last 2 weeks. I've maybe walked a total of 10 or 20 blocks. That's nothing. I mean, I would do more than that in a single day. I've even taken to walking up to my ninth floor apartment for a couple of reasons. Not just the exercise, it's also good for cardiovascular, lungs. But I also feel it saves energy from, forcing the elevator in my building to come up for just me. And then it's there and it goes back to its resting floor. I mean, they're programmed to like go back to a middle floor so that it's always like optimized for wherever the next call may come in from. But I feel like that's so wasteful, the energy involved in lifting that elevator up to my floor just for me. If I see that there's a whole crowd of people waiting for the elevator, maybe I would go on, but I still like to do the walking. Anyway, I seem to have overdone it. So in addition to the physical therapist telling me to really like take it easy, rest it, stop walking up 9 flights, um, he recommended other things. Now, like in the shoe category, I'm a big fan of Skechers. I have multiple pairs, different colors, and some are a little nicer than others. Some are more sneaker-like. I must have like half a dozen pairs in my closet right now. They're really comfortable for me. And when I first started wearing them, I noticed a lot of other people were wearing them too. And I thought, wow, what a company. Like maybe I should buy stock in this company, which I did. So I was like heartbroken when the physical therapist said to me, I don't like Skechers. They don't have good enough support for me, he's saying. So also the podiatrist recommended different brands of shoes and orthotics to put inside whatever shoes I have. So I don't know. All this resting thing, I already thought I was resting because I do spend a lot of time kick back knitting, as I have mentioned to you many times before. But okay, the upside is goody. While I'm on sort of bed rest, I get to knit even more. That's why I have so much progress to show you this week because, yeah, I've been sitting around knitting a lot more. Well, that about does it for this episode. Wishing all of you a very happy new year. May 2025 be the year that all of your dreams come true. I wish for all of you a year of peace and robust, fascinating, wonderful knitting. I will see you in January. It's only days away, but I'll see you next year. Mwah, mwah. Happy New Year. Stay well, everyone. Stay safe.